Joining me today is Dustin Kirkland, VP of Engineering at Chainguard. Today, we're going to have Dustin back. He's had quite a year. We're going to talk a little bit about a bunch of things he's done this year. He's been a little bit of an analyst. He's done a little traveling, and he's got an exciting new position. But Dustin, first of all, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Brandon. What a great podcast. I really enjoy it. I check in every once in a while and always interested in the content.
Well, fantastic. Well, listen, we always want to start with like the most important thing that people come to this podcast is men's fashion. And, a while back, you posted a picture with Vint Cerf, who I believe is the father of TCP/IP, kind of a legendary person in IT. If you don't know who he is, go read the Wikipedia. That's a little homework. But more importantly, you took a picture with him, and I think it was at a conference, and you're both wearing a three-piece suit. And I think you're a dapper person, Dustin. I wanted to get your sense of fashion advice for everyone. Is the three-piece suit, is it back? Did it ever leave? Is it just your way of standing out at a conference?
I kind of stumbled into a custom tailored suit walking around Budapest, Romania. I was there for work in 2016, I think. And my wife had been telling me, look, you need to get a better suit. And I wandered into this tailor and was just asking questions. And before I knew it, I had bought two suits. I was measured and delivered. That was a Sunday. They were delivered to my hotel on Friday. They were incredible. I stayed friends with the tailor. He made three more suits for me. And he's actually, he's actually in technology now, and we're set to meet up in the States for dinner sometime soon. So yeah, I totally stumbled into this, but man, I do enjoy being well dressed. So take that for what it's worth.
Well, meeting Vint was, I was going to say, because I think it's a way to stand out. It's amazing how often what you wear sort of does. So I think in tech, right, you're kind of going opposite. You're going a little bit more formal, and I think it is a way that people get used to kind of seeing it, which is cool.
Yeah, it gave me the opportunity to meet Vint Cerf, believe it or not. I was at a Google conference. I had given a talk. Remarkably, he walked into the little room. I had a line of people to talk to after the talk. One of them is Vint Cerf. He comes up, and I'm like scared, afraid of what he's going to ask me. And what he comes to tell me is that he loved that I was wearing a three-piece suit. So I have one of my favorite pictures I'll treasure forever of myself and Vint Cerf. Of course, if you don't know, he always dresses to the nines in a suit. My only regret is I wasn't wearing a tie. So I had the jacket, the shirt, the vest, pants, but I wasn't wearing a tie. And if I had one thing to do over again, I would have been wearing the tie in that.
Hey man, I think you did well. We'll put a picture, link it to the picture so everyone can see. We'll even make it look the chapter art of this segment so everyone can see it. And of course, Vint Cerf, he of course looks great. But listen, so one of the things we've been talking on and off this year, and I know you've sort of had this exciting year. So it's I thought it'd be fun to kind of bring you on because you've done a bunch of different interesting things. So let's kind of start with one of the things that I thought was real cool that you kind of did. I'm going to call it you became a little part-time analyst, kind of doing some work for SiliconANGLE and theCUBE. So maybe tell us what are those things and how did this whole opportunity come about?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super passionate about it. I mean, I enjoy, participating in the, let's call it the media. And that's what we're doing here. You and I, Brandon. SiliconANGLE is an analyst firm. theCUBE is the video half of that analyst firm, founded by John Furrier and Dave Vellante. I was a guest on theCUBE a number of times, and it was a great opportunity for me to get out there and tell, at the time, the Canonical and Ubuntu story. And then again, the Google story. So, I was a guest a couple of times. I got to be good friends with John and really admire him. I look up to him as a friend and mentor. He invited me to join him as a guest analyst. And so I flew out to San Francisco and covered Google Next with him a couple of months ago. And I just got back last night from KubeCon Chicago, where again, I joined him and Savannah Peterson as they covered KubeCon. And it's so much fun to get to meet so many people and enable them to tell their story. I guess to an extent, that's what you're doing here with the Software Defined Talk podcast, giving people the opportunity, the voice, the microphone to tell their story. This is that just been in, a little bit more bite-sized chunks.
Now, what did you, because I think they do a pretty, a pretty robust setup at these conferences. It's almost like there's like a big desk, like a video. It's almost like a live report. I mean, I think you kind of put in here like Sports Center. It's like on a site, Sports Center or something like that.
Yeah, it's super cool. If you haven't seen it, or maybe you've seen it, didn't know what it was, you go to almost any tech conference. I think they do 100 conferences per year, which is, averaging more than one a week. They've got an East Coast and a West Coast team. They set up usually like a 20 by 20, take over a 20 by 20 typical booth space, have a little elevated platform, 3 or 4 cameras, a desk, 3 or 4 chairs, microphones, outstanding array of guests, usually for 10, 15-minute spots, lights, a little bit of makeup. They'll get rid of that shine on your forehead, and it's a first-class operation. And then what goes on in the back end, it's live streamed to the internet at thecube.net. But man, John has been, and the Cube team, they've been early to the AI party. They've got tens of thousands of videos all ingested into, all transcribed to text. The recordings are transcribed to text, all indexed by OpenAI. And you can search almost any term that you've seen, that you've heard, and find indexed into every single video someone talking about anything that you would search for. It's a pretty incredible setup.
It is pretty cool. So what was like, kind of take us behind the scenes? How does it work? Do they kind of give you a rundown of guests and you do a little prep, or do they just want you to kind of come on, sort of like just react to announcements? Like, kind of what's the behind the scenes production of how topics get selected?
There's a good array of guests. The team does a lot of work in prep for the show to line that up. I'm a part-time analyst. We'll get into the full-time day job. So, this is something that I was able to jump on. Of course, with a full-time job, I'll try to avoid any conflicts of interest, just to be professional there. It's a lot of fun behind the scenes. We'll do a little bit of off-camera prep with the guests, get comfortable, chat a little bit about, a couple of our topics, and then camera's rolling and it's live. There's no cutting and editing after the fact. It's straight to the internet, Brandon.
I love it. That's fantastic. All right. Well, maybe take us behind the scenes then. So you've been on the vendor side for a long time. Then you've been doing this part-time analyst side, and then you're going to be back on the vendor side. We'll talk about more. So what do you know? What secrets have you learned about being on the analyst side that you can share with all the people that have to interact with analysts out there?
I don't want to give away all the analyst secrets, nor have I learned all the analyst secrets in all of, a couple of months of doing this. I do have, infinitely more respect and appreciation for the effort that analysts put into their work, to their research, but especially the value of objectivity. That's something that, as a customer of analysts, I've appreciated, but I don't think I entirely appreciated or understood as much as I do now. It's easy for you and I to have a hot take and an opinion on something. It's different to go and spend some time to really dig in, do some research, and let the data objectively speak for itself.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, that's cool. Well, it's really exciting. So it's cool that you'll be continuing on. So we'll have to tell everyone. Well, in fact, you can see Dustin not only get his hot takes, watch his interview, you can check in on his fashion. Sounds like there's a reason for him to buy more suits, which is really what's most important. Now, well, let's use some of these newfound analyst skills, and more importantly, let's use some of the hot take skills. So KubeCon Chicago, you just mentioned, just recently happened. So everyone's kind of doing their recap. So let's start with you. Kind of the broad question. What were your key takeaways from KubeCon this year?
It was great to be back at KubeCon. I missed the last couple of years while I spent time in financial services, where we were heavy users of open source Linux, lots of Kubernetes I found there. But it didn't bring me to, the conference, the builder conferences like this. So it was great to be back at KubeCon for the first time in a couple of years, since before the pandemic. Not surprised if you've turned on a news station anytime, anywhere. AI was hot topic. The opening keynote on Tuesday morning it was, percolated throughout lots of the talks. And I think, that there was a lot of focus on what it's going to take to make Kubernetes a better platform for AI jobs. A couple of people noted that Kubernetes was not designed with AI in mind. It was very much designed first for web app hosting, and then eventually to some extent for batchy serverless type jobs, both of which are close to, but not exactly the same as machine learning, large language models, inferencing. And there's, a little bit more infrastructure that needs to be in place. There's also a lot of complexity in Kubernetes that's still exposed to the end users that, I don't think and I'm going to say we as part of the Kubernetes community again, I don't think we necessarily need or certainly want to expose to end users. So there was a lot of talk about that. And then finally, security, and to some extent that'll lead into, the later talk we'll have. But security, always critical, and maybe more critical than ever before.
Yeah, that all makes sense. So now on AI, because I've kind of reading everything, and I've seen a lot of people talking about it. What's your take around, like someone else kind of mentioned, it's like everything's just being dipped in AI. Like everyone's sort of just like stapling on AI to their marketing and things like that. Kind of what's your takeaway? Was there anything that stood out for you, I guess, on two fronts here? It was like, is there something like new and different? And then, of course, everything is just moving so fast, right? Like, literally it's like OpenAI, same week as KubeCon, I don't know, a ton of announcements out of there, right? So is there any place that you see beyond just sort of like Kubernetes, if you will, being better at supporting AI, that a place where we can we really think AI is going to add something that is significant that we can kind of touch and feel right now?
Yeah, I don't know well enough the demographic of your listeners, but hopefully some of them can remember the early days of the internet. And I'm talking, back to Vint Cerf, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking here 93, 94, 95, all the way up to, call it the .com boom. So the late 90s, everything was dipped in getting online, right? If you've seen the Vince Vaughn movie, The Intern, getting on the line, right? It was all about getting online, and that's where we're at with AI. It is quite the topic, because I think we're looking at the exact or a fundamental shift on the same order of magnitude as what how the internet disrupted typical businesses. That's exactly where we're at with AI. It's still a little bit early in that we haven't seen exactly how that's going to play out everywhere, but it's going to play out everywhere. And so it's a hot topic, because people realize that this could be, this could be the fundamental thing that really disrupts who's at the top, or it could be the thing that cements who's at the top, to be at the top, for another generation until, whatever the next disruptive thing that might come along. But probably 2 or more decades later, considering, we're talking about the dawn of the internet, which was the 90s. Here we are in the 2020s. It might be another 20 or 30 years before something as disruptive comes about.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think it kind of just comes down to, it's sort of, we're in the middle, if you will. This is the sausage making, and it's like no one has any of the answers. And I guess what's exciting about it is, like, I don't know, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people are going to try like a whole bunch of stuff. Like most of it won't work. And then something will emerge, and we will all look back on it and be like, yeah, of course, that's the way you were going to use AI. And of course, that company is really successful, which is always fun. I think it's like just a fun time to be involved in technology. Well, let's talk a little bit about KubeCon, the conferences just in general. Was there anything about, the conference? Is it different from a vendor conference anyway? Any kind of specific interesting things that stood out to you?
Well, I mean, it is a vendor conference. I don't think it's worth hiding that. There's a great developer track. A number of my colleagues gave some amazing talks at KubeCon. I'd certainly recommend people to check out some of the talks. There is a developer day. Monday of the conference is the developer day, and that's before the expo floor is open. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there's a conference floor where I would estimate tens of millions of dollars were spent. advertising, pushing services, goods and services built around that cloud native landscape, including ours. This isn't a condemnation. I think the business model of open source, thankfully, from my perspective, has matured to a point where tens of millions of dollars get poured into the pipeline development, such that successful companies can emerge out of the back end and continue to pour a ton of that into great software development. Again, open source software development again. So I think it's a virtuous circle. I think without a vendor conference around something like this, it would still be on the fringes. So, I would say kudos to the Cloud Native Foundation and the Linux Foundation for putting something together like this and growing it to a level that, it drove the economy for a segment of Chicago for the week, as it does for every city. Just, trying to get an Uber to the airport was, put money in someone's pocket,
For sure. Well, what do the other important subject that's come out of the Chicago event was, Chicago style pizza. Where do you come down? Do you have a hot take on that? Good, bad? Are you a New York style, Chicago style, Detroit? Something? I
do like a good wood fired a good wood fired pizza, and I don't know how much Chicago style pizza makes it into a wood fired oven. I have not explored far enough into the culinary delights of Chicago's pizza. I think I appreciate it for what it is, which is lasagna on bread, almost, or it's as heavy to me as lasagna and bread together. I guess that's not fair. There's pasta and lasagna. I don't know. I'm teasing about.
Listen. There have been some strong takes in the software defined talk this week. That's probably been the strongest takes have been on the pizza. I'll just say join the software defined talk if you want more on pizza, because there's some people that like it and there's some people that are adamant that it's not good. So I don't know. I haven't had it in a while.
I think I'll appreciate it for what it is. I don't think I'm going to eat a Chicago style pizza on a weekly basis anytime soon.
Well, if you do, we're going to all have to get some new suits. We're all going to grow a few sizes. All right, let's get on to your exciting announcement here. So like I said, you've been doing some other stuff, but Chainguard, it came out here. You've joined them and they raised a bunch of money. So why don't you take us through both? Like, tell us who Chainguard is, how you got there, and like a little bit about the background of the company.
Yeah, you bet. Chainguard is our tagline is the secure source for open source. We're in the software supply chain security space. Try saying that 5 times fast. We help secure, all the software that goes into an organization that they need to run. And typically that's running now inside of a container inside of Kubernetes itself. And so there's often a stack of technologies. You write some code that you're going to use either internally inside of an intranet application. You write some code that you're going to ship to your customers. You write some code that powers your software as a service. Typically, you're not writing all of that code. You're usually writing less than 1% of the code that you're actually running. The vast majority of that code is being sourced, probably open sourced from libraries somewhere, and that could be typically Python libraries or Golang libraries. It could be Rust or PHP or something else, but usually you're building on top of certainly a tool chain that could be compiled code or interpreted code. Typically that's a whole bunch of libraries. That's everything that you would include or import into your code. And so you're talking about a lot of code that you didn't necessarily write. Someone's got to package that, and there's a couple of different ways to obtain that code and package it. And we've got a unique way of doing it at Chainguard, where we can help secure that entire supply chain of software. We did just announce our Series B, raised 61 million, and it's an exciting time. I do love this stage of a startup. I think product market fit is there. We've got great response from our customers, and now it's really about scaling that engine. And in the ideal case, we're helping change the world for the better in terms of software security.
All right, exciting. Well, first of all, I'm gonna go back and correct myself. It is Chainguard. I keep saying Chainguard. I don't know
Just
why.
like no, just like the bike, like a bicycle, right?
I was gonna
Chain
say, I
guard,
also want to
thing
call it
hanging off your bicycle.
chainsaw, so I'm just gonna apologize like 10 times. Like, I'm saying it right. So Chainguard. So we got it right here. So software supply chain is sort of like, I don't know. I think it's probably been a problem forever, but I feel like the SolarWinds, fiasco, if you will, let's call it, sort of like highlighted, the need for it everywhere. So maybe kind of start at the beginning around, because you had a bunch of different offerings inside a Chainguard. So who can use it? Let's just start with the basic stuff. It's sort of like if I'm just a developer by myself and I'm maybe building some stuff, like how can I use it? What does it cost me? What's available? How would I kind of integrate it into like my day-to-day workflow?
Yeah, first of all, I think the SolarWinds identification of the problem is a great way to look at it, and I'd encourage anyone who wants to understand like what can go wrong in the software supply chain. That's a great example. And there was an article that was published by Sequoia, which led our Series A, an interview with our CEO and founder Dan Lawrence that references the SolarWinds Day, let's call it, as one of the founding moments and one of the moments in time that explain the existence of Chainguard. So there's a great article that dives much deeper into that, and maybe we can link to it from the podcast page. Who can use it? Anyone can use it, and we are built. We're an open source company built around open source, but we also have commercial products as well. And having spent more than 2 decades now working on open source and seen a lot of different commercial models emerge, I think more than ever now it's important to be clear about what's open source and what's commercial, and hopefully both users of the open source and customers of the commercial product will just appreciate a little bit of transparency there. So our images. Our open source images are free for head being the latest and greatest version of any given open source package or image. That's free to use. It's free to download, and for developers who generally want to be on latest and greatest and roll with latest and greatest releases, that's our Wolfie distro, and those are free. Our commercial product is built around those images, but we add the capability of pinning versions to something older than head. Typically, I think anyone who spent some time in enterprise will appreciate that production software, you often need to control when you update or upgrade to a newer version. Sometimes there's some internal CI/CD that your tests need to pass. Sometimes you need to pin a certain version for a particular feature, or for some change that you're not ready to take on yet. Or maybe it's the retail season. We're getting into the retail season. I've served a number of customers that certainly their sales cycles revolve around a Black Friday or through the Christmas season, at which point change needs to be minimized until that critical retail season we pass through that. And so for the most part, the customers that we're serving want a little bit more control over what their software bill of materials, which is something we should get in there and define, includes, and being more specific than just give me the latest and greatest Postgres database. Just give me the latest and greatest Golang tool chain, or give me the latest and greatest Ruby stack, which is usually what a developer wants, but that might not always be the right answer for the production hosted software as a service.
Gotcha. All right. So it's good. Everyone can use, if you will, the latest and greatest images, and then many enterprises are going to want to pin to, I think, older versions. That for sure. So that makes total sense. So let's go in and talk a little bit about one of these images. I think I like the tagline here was sort of minimal hardened images signed. So why don't we start with it's easy. I think, yes, we all know what minimal means, but maybe take us through, how do you create a minimal image? How does that kind of happen? What does that mean to everyone that's using these things?
Yeah, so let's start at the finish line and work our way backwards. What does the customer ultimately want? They want secure software. What does that mean? Usually that means 0 CVEs. which is vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities and exploits. So our goal is to produce images that have zero known CVEs in them. And we do that through a combination of first minimizing what goes into that image, stripping out absolutely everything that is unnecessary. I've spent most of my career building distributions, trying to make the environment as comfortable as possible, trying to make it as usable as possible. When, as it turns out, there's typically not a human on the inside of this image. These aren't desktops. These aren't servers that someone's logging into. It's packaged software that needs to run typically on and expose an API, expose a network port, maybe do some work, crunch some numbers and spit out some data. That's all software on the inside of there. And if we can minimize how much software is on the inside of that either compiled container image or that compiled binary, we can drastically reduce the footprint of exposure. The more code, the more libraries, the more packages that are in some software, the more opportunities there are for there to be exploits for someone on the outside who's trying to break that software, maybe break into that software. That gives them that many more opportunities if you over provision the software on the inside. So it really starts with being maniacal almost about removing anything that's unnecessary. And then the second piece is all about velocity, keeping up with the National Vulnerability Database, tracking all of the CVEs that might apply to the software. And then triaging that and making a determination, is the software in Chainguard's images affected? It might not be, simply because of, what I've spent the last 2 minutes explaining. It may just not be applicable, which is great. When it is applicable, then we need to assess we need to triage its severity, and it could go anywhere from critical to high to medium to low. And then, based on that triage, we certainly want to eliminate the vulnerabilities wherever possible. And typically that means going back upstream and trying to find the version or the fixes, and then updating our packages accordingly. Once we update those packages, put it through our own quality assurance, continuous integration testing, and then publish that new image. Put the new version on head available in the open source registry, and then any of our customers who depend on that will push newly rebuilt, now with the CVEs eliminated, images to their registries as well.
Got it. Okay, so it's good. So it's sort of like minimal, just what you need. Hardened means that you've applied all the known fixes for anything that's out there. And then, of course, why don't you talk about signing it, right? Because that's sort of like, how do we know we actually have the right thing? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned SBOM before, which is such a fun word to say. It sounds like a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. And SBOM is a software bill of materials. It's a really sexy name for a pretty boring, typically YAML file that includes metadata about what's inside of an image. That's usually, a list of packages and versions, and other metadata about the image. It'll also include checksums, hashes, digests of the software, and the configuration even can be part of that as well. And then the signature is typically a public-private key set of signatures that help you ensure that this thing was signed by something or someone that you trust, typically. So software bill of materials, this is, starting to really make headlines in the U.S. federal government space, as we have what I think is a very important push for more secure software running our infrastructure. And it's everything from civil, governments, civic governments, to our defense contractors, and straight into our national defense itself. Software attacks can be as dangerous and harmful and deadly potentially as physical attacks in the real world, it certainly can manifest itself in that way. So really important. There's a number of standards around this, one of which is known as FedRAMP. And I would say a number of our customers that seek out Chainguard for our product, for our solution, are looking to satisfy their FedRAMP requirements around eliminating vulnerabilities in their software within, very tight timelines and SLAs.
Yeah, and for everyone, probably, if you're not familiar with FedRAMP, it's one way to basically, one standard you usually need to comply with to sell anything to the federal government or the DoD, and there's lots of other standards as well.
Or contractors working for the federal government, the DoD as well,
But I think this is one of those times, sometimes you can, not that I would ever do this. Sometimes you want to roll your eyes at different standards, but sometimes you want to flip around and say, a lot of these, there's a lot of value, even if you don't have to deal with FedRAMP. I think, the SBOM, as you said, it's kind of funny. It is, as I say it is kind of seems negative, but but putting that aside, that connotation, you're right. It's sort of it's probably one of these things the sooner you do it in your career, whatever you're building, right? The sooner that you kind of do it, the better off you're going to be. Because eventually someone's going to ask you, or you just may ask yourself, right? You're going to have to go back and figure out what's actually in this thing. Because any project that gets even reasonably big, right? No one's going to remember it all. So, if you will, it's like eating your vegetables. Do it right up front and you'll feel a lot better. Well, now how many images?
That's a good point. I just want to underline that one thing you said there. We talk a lot about shifting left. This is about starting left, so if you're able to do this from the beginning, build on top of a secure base, there's a lot less pain and effort and cost and expense and, overhead in later having to shift left. So that's one thing that I think some of our earliest adopters and early customers are seeing the benefit of starting here, as opposed to sometime later having to make some adjustment. Okay, now we're going to lock things down. That is often very difficult, and there's a lot of wasted energy and calories spent doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what, we think about all these images, one, maybe just define what an image is, just making sure, is this Docker container? Is this a VM? What actually is an image in this case? Yeah.
So let me give one other fundamental piece of information. So we talk about packages and we talk about images. Our package format in Chainguard is actually an APK, which is an Alpine package, which is different than an APK, the Android package. It's kind of unfortunate that it's the same three letters and we're talking about packages on different operating systems. But our package base is an Alpine package, which is equivalent but different from an RPM package that you would find on a Fedora or a Red Hat, or a Deb that you would find on a Debian or Ubuntu-based system. So we use APK, and there's a handful of fundamental differences. I, having myself packaged a ton of Debian packages and a couple of RPMs as well, there's a real elegance to APKs, and it's well suited to that minimal minimal package. And there's a lot of logic that we don't have to worry about as much inside of an APK, especially around upgrades. There's a lot of somewhat brittle logic that makes its way into Debs and RPMs to ensure that you upgrade, successfully from one version to the next. With container, and I'll get to images here in a second, but with packages and containers, the methodology is much more of the destroy the container and start a new one. And so there's less of that inline serial logic of, okay, if I was on this version and this file was in this place, now I need to move it to this place and run sed over some configuration file and change this thing. You don't really need that in a world where you you kill the container and you start a new one. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's the first piece, packages. And that package repository is, big and growing, but that's the first fundamental piece. And we need packages of the open source software, of the tool chains, of the third-party apps. You could even build your own, unique and proprietary enterprise packages in that format as well. Packages are the building blocks that go into an image. An image is an archive. It's fundamentally a file system that's Linux-like, and I use the word Linux in a weird way. There's no kernel. There's no these images don't typically boot. They go straight to running in usually a Kubernetes world, but could run almost anywhere. It's OCI compatible, Docker like or Docker image in essence. That image is built from packages. So you've got some manifest of packages that get installed, laid down on a file system, maybe some configuration and some instructions on how to run that. And then that image is what runs. And you could run it locally using a Docker binary locally. You could load it into a registry and run it in a Kubernetes, or any other OCI compatible container orchestration system.
Gotcha. So are you providing both the packages and the container or and images in this case? Or like, can I get just the package and do that? And
yeah, you need both. I mean, if you were, a human sitting on a command line and you wanted to APK install a package, that's, the command that you would use, which would be like an apt-get or a yum install. That's usually the starting point for a developer who's creating their own image. An image, you typically Docker run that image, and that image is then running and maybe exposes a service on a port, or you drop into a shell or something like that if you wanted to interact with it. At scale, you're running dozens of these, maybe hundreds of these through a Helm chart. So Helm's the next level of abstraction. If APK is the install a package, Docker is the run my image, Helm would be construct this giant service that has a web front end and a database back end and some sidecar and some monitoring and all of those pieces. You would typically build a Helm chart for that level of interaction.
All right, cool. So kind of got like everything available to me. If I want the lowest level all the way up to like just give me the latest thing. Now, is there any relationship, because the thing I think people maybe would think about is, Docker Hub, right? There's lots of places to get images today. Like, I don't know, are you replacing that? Are you working with them? Like, what's the relationship there, if any?
Yeah, there's lots of registries out there. We have our own registry, the Chainguard registry, cgr.dev. But there's, gcr.io, there's Docker Hub, there's various different registries. Our customers typically want to run their own registry, which is certainly, the couple of years I spent in financial services and out in the industry, you're going to have your own, repository of software, your own repository of images. So a typical enterprise customer would mirror those images or the subset of images that they need into their registry. And by the way, a registry is typically just some object storage, like an S3 or similar, and a database that maps where to find an image to some metadata, a given image name or tag or version number. So there's not a lot of mystery around a registry. It's not a super complicated thing. Then there are image registries all over the place.
Okay. And then kind of wrap up on the subject, just give us a sense, like how many, packages and images are out there? What's available?
Oh, thousands and growing every single day. At the package level, I think you'd find most of what you need in Wolfie that you would find in almost any other distro at this point. Images we're being a little bit more thoughtful about, not more thoughtful, that sounds like we're not being thoughtful about packages. We certainly are. We're a little more directed with the images, building the images that our customers need and want. So there are plenty of generally available open source images, again, on the order of thousands of those available as well. My effort, leading the engineering team at Chainguard, is very much serving the needs of our customers and, burning down that backlog of unique images that we need to build for the customers that we're serving.
All right, you just heard it there. Everyone email Dustin directly with all your requests for new images. I'm sure.
Let me have them. Yeah, let's hear it.
Love that. Okay, and just to go over kind of the free forever. That's actually, let me take that back. Free of charge is Wolfie. I'm going to spell it. It's WOLFI. Right. That's
right. Yeah. The quick story there. Our mascot is an octopus. And a wolfie octopus is the smallest octopus in the world. You got to Google the pictures for a wolfie octopus. It's like the size of your thumbnail or smaller. It's this adorable little thing. Obviously, we're shooting for the smallest container images in the world. So Wolfie is our beloved mascot.
Okay, good. Well, I'll have to look that up and find some pictures of it. That sounds exciting. And then for those that want to buy, it is there's Chainguard, which is the commercially supported
Chainguard images. Yep.
And then and he said so typically people buy them in like images or bundles. It sounds like between 10 and 100. Is that kind of
I mean usually that's what you need to. Yeah, most of our customers have a complex stack, to build their application, and a typical customer engagement is dozens, and they would buy a bundle of images, support for a bundle of images. They'll tell us, hey, our software stack is 67, requires 67 different images running in as services in Kubernetes. We'll work with them. Our solutions architects and customer engineers will work with that customer to understand their environment. Some of those images we'll already have on the shelf and are ready to go, and they can get started with immediately. Some are close, and we need to, make some. Some of our customers come and they need something like FIPS requirements, FIPS encryption certification. So we may have a base image without FIPS, and then we need to add FIPS to that. And then occasionally we've got new requests for images that we haven't built. If it's open source, we'll get to work on it with upstream. And there's often a piece of this, which is, the customer's it's their own code that they're running. It's a Java application and it needs, they need to build their own Java stack inside of some images. So yeah, that's what a typical engagement with Chainguard looks like.
All right. Sounds exciting. It sounds like you guys are doing really well. Everyone, no excuses now not to go get an S-bomb and at least be more secure. So everyone needs to go do it. Now, listen, hey, we're headed into the holiday season, and, you and I have been talking on and off this past year. So I think maybe let's kind of like change subjects a little bit. You kind of started off this year. I call it, let you describe it, a little bit of a sabbatical, but every sabbatical needs to have a pilgrimage. So I thought maybe we'd talk about why you decided to walk and hike and help. I'm going to make sure I say it right. Is it Camino de Santiago? Am I saying that right?
Camino de Santiago. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us, what is this thing? What did you do?
Yeah. So look, this has been one of the most incredible years of my life. And I don't say that lightly. I took 9 months off, almost. And having spent a quarter of a century, almost 25 years working pretty much nonstop. And if you've been around me, you know that when I work, I really pour my entirety of my heart and soul into whatever I'm working on. Man, that's exhausting, and more exhausting than I think I'd even realized. And so I got this opportunity to take some time off. And one of the first things I did was start thinking about, hey, how am I going to spend this? And I love a good long hike. And I've done 100 miles in 7 days at a time, several times around the world. I've done some backcountry hiking through Scotland and Switzerland and New Zealand and around the US as well. But I wanted to do something a bit different. And so a good friend of mine who was in a similar place in his career where he had some time off, he and I on I don't want to even say on a whim because we put a lot of time into this. We started looking at where could we go? What could we do? And one of the things that kept coming up was hiking the Camino de Santiago. And so that's what we set out to do. We started in Porto, Lisbon, and hiked north for about 170 miles. And hiked our way to Santiago de Compostela, which is it's a cathedral in the northwest corner of Spain. And it was just an incredible experience. We spent 13 days, walking. We covered 170 miles. It was about 13 miles a day we were doing. Some days were a little bit longer. Our longest days were maybe 20 miles. Our shortest days were 8 or 9. Met a lot of people along the way. It just really, really got, left the laptop. There was no laptop. I had a phone and, checked in occasionally, but just to put the inbox on hold and wake up every morning, and the only thing you have to do is walk about 4 hours with a backpack to the next town, and to be done with that around noon, have some lunch, maybe a little bit of the local cuisine, some meat, some wine, some cheese, and like, I don't know, it was so refreshing, Brandon.
I can tell you always, every time we talk about it, I can tell it kind of comes through how much you got out of it. So I think it's a pretty popular, I don't know, it's reasonably popular trail. So it's not like I mean, I guess you kind of passed a lot of people doing something similar. Is that kind of a good description of what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, you can read all about it on the Wikipedia page. I'll give you like the brief highlights. The Camino hike has been, people have been documenting their walk on the Camino de Santiago, which means just road to Santiago, for over 1,000 years. There was a monk in the 900s AD, I think around 980 AD, that wrote what is widely considered the first travel guidebook, which was his walk to Santiago. And he was not the first one to make this walk. It had been around for long enough for him to actually write a guidebook on his journey. And that still exists today. It's actually, obviously I haven't read it, but it's well regarded as like, it's exactly what you see in this stack of DK guidebooks behind me, DK Eyewitness guides. You can see on your screen, at least, Brandon. He wrote one over 1,000 years ago about his hike, where to stay, what to eat, what to drink, things to do off the beaten path. So people have been walking this for 1,000 years. And everyone who completes the journey gets a Compostela, which is this huge scroll papyrus written in Latin that says you completed this hike to the cathedral. The church in Santiago has been doing this again for 1,000 years. I've got mine in my room here. But the other thing that's like historic and interesting about this is that the path was built by the Romans. So we're talking 2,000 years old. More than one, actually every couple of miles, there would be this giant carved piece of granite with some Roman numerals and Roman text. And those are called, get this, milestones. Why? Because the Romans put mile markers each step along the way. So yes, in software, we talk about milestones. Product management, we talk about milestones. Well, we hiked past about 170 milestones on the way, but this was incredible. I'm talking, we crossed probably 100 bridges over creeks, streams, rivers, built by the Romans, again, 2,000 years ago. But yeah, it was an incredible part of history to, walk this trail for 2 solid weeks.
Yeah, I remember you telling me kind of offline. I think you said, I asked you, like, did you listen to music? So you said you were mostly unplugged, right? Weren't doing like the podcast, music, just kind of just truly being in the moment, as they say.
That's absolutely right. I thought I was gonna. I mean, I love podcasts, present company included. I love listening to books, and I thought I was gonna do a whole bunch of that with all this time on my hands. My AirPods stayed in my pocket pretty much the whole time. Walked with a good friend. We chatted about all sorts of things, life, the universe, and everything. No public transportation. I didn't get into a car, a vehicle, a bus at all for 2 weeks. Everything by foot. It was really an incredible experience.
That's pretty cool. And it also said, there's a bunch of different accommodations along the way. You told me kind of offline as well, right? So you could stay, like, I don't know, let's say something more luxurious or something more minimal. Is that kind of what you did?
Yeah. So I would say there's no camping. So there's no tents, which I do enjoy. And most of the hikes I've done through, I mentioned New Zealand, Switzerland, Scotland, US, East Coast, West Coast. Most of that I've done with a tent. There's no tents here. This is, there's pastoral, I think. There's lots of vineyards and pastures and stuff, but it's cities, towns along the Portuguese and Spanish coast. The accommodations, it's well organized for Camino hikers. And what I mean by that is there's lots of places to stay that cater entirely to pilgrims, pellegrinos, as we're called on the trail. But there's a range. everything from there's free accommodation, usually attached to most of the churches and cathedrals. There's what amounts to a hostel. It's public. It's actually paid for by the state, and there's a voluntary tip that you can leave when you stay. And by a voluntary tip, €5 to €10, $5 to $10 is customary, but it's free. For pilgrims who don't have that, they're allowed to stay one night for free, free of charge. The accommodations there, it's usually bunk beds in a giant room. Everybody's together, men, women, everyone's together, and it's basic accommodations. The one step up from that, there's a private version of that. Private hostels, again, bunk beds, a big room, 30, 40, 50 bunks. It's a great way to meet people. We did that a few times, and it really is communal. It's everyone doing the same thing you're doing, people from all over the world. And it's a great way to meet some people. There are private hotels and private Airbnbs. I'd never really used booking.com, but booking.com is the way to book your accommodations. Usually a night or two in advance is enough, or same day works. Here, that's anything from an apartment to a small hotel. Again, meager accommodations. And then occasionally you can find, and that's priced, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 euros a piece. For two people. So split that in half if you're bunking up and sharing, as we were. And then you'll find hotels, a couple of hotels along the way. We stayed in hotels in Porto at the beginning, the first night, and in Santiago the last night or two. Everything else, we were enjoying the Auberg, as it's called, the hostels, or some of the smaller little private hotels or private rooms that someone lets out.
Well, fantastic. Well, I was about to ask you, what did you learn? But I think I'm going to answer for you. I can tell just, from us talking kind of off and on this podcast throughout the year, like you definitely look like a man who's recharged and excited about the new opportunity to change. So I'm actually not going to make you do the testimony. I'll just say, I'll do it for you. It's like, yeah, Dustin has definitely enjoyed his year off, and he looks like he's ready to go make Chainguard very successful, as well as, his part-time analyst job. So, all right, Dustin, well, if someone wants to tell you what images they need, or maybe more exciting, they want to ask you about the Camino, what's the best way someone can find you online?
Passionate about both. Happy to engage on either. You can find me on Twitter at Dustin Kirkland on Twitter, the same on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, happy to connect. Would love to hear your feedback, and I can certainly geek out about the Camino with anyone who's thinking about it.
That's right. I bet you know what? Here's a little hack. I bet you if you ask a question about the Camino and make a request for a new image, you probably get a little bit more.
Blend the two. Let's talk about it.
We never know. So, all right. Well, Dustin, thanks a lot for being on the show today.
Thank you, Brandon. Always a pleasure.
All right, for everyone else, if this is the first time you're listening to Software Defined Talk, then welcome. You can subscribe by going to softwaredefinedtalk.com or subscribe in the podcast player you're listening to right now. If you would like a sticker, just email your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world. And thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.